Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've done it again. Welcome to the Great De-Loosening. We have the Honorable, Venerable Sol Luckman on with us again, gracing us with his presence to walk us through even deeper the world cult and you, as well as many other shenanigans that I'm sure we will get into today. So, without further ado, the late, great Sol Luckman, how are you doing?
The late great. I feel like that. I'm tired today. I've got to get my mojo going here. Thanks for having me, Donnie.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for hopping on again. You're a very welcome guest to the Spellbreakers podcast. I've gotten tons of amazing feedback from our first interview. I feel like we broke some boundaries, some barriers, pushing the great De-Loosening. And since I have been
Yeah.
a subscriber to your soulluckman.substack.com Substack, been absolutely loving it, getting delooshed more and more every day. But Saul, I had some questions for you based off your latest and greatest book, The World Cult, your place in it and your way out of it. But yeah, I guess first, anything top of mind for you? Anything you want to kick things off with?
Oh goodness. I've just finished another of the audio chapters for the World Cult and You, and it's a really long, epic one about the great parasite. So this is very fresh in my mind. So just fire away.
Awesome. Okay, well, first and foremost, origin story of the book. My understanding is that you said the book wrote itself while contemplating the reality game board. So, Lookman, walk us through that and your process.
It's just been what's been happening with me over my last several books. This phenomenon of the book kind of presenting itself and me not having to spend a lot of time thinking about it. And I know that may sound very strange to a lot of writers, and to other writers, it may not sound strange at all. But my experience dating back to my 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 novel before last that was called Snooze, The Story of Awakening, that kind of came through in a rush. I tell the story of that in various places and how that plot line just kind of happened very fast, and then I just wrote it. I just went with it, and then it was even more extreme when I got to Callie the Destroyer, the follow-up novel to Snooze, when literally I downloaded the entire plot over the course of one sleepless night. So that was really, really wild. This was pre, this was at the end of 2019, pre all of the shenanigans, to use that word, that went down in 2020. And the novel was actually very prescient. It was about many of the things that came to pass. So that was an extraordinary experience. With The World Cult and You, I began writing a series of essays about cults and cultism, the cult phenomenon, mind control, brainwashing, that sort of thing. And it just shaped itself into a book. Before I knew it, I was looking at a book and I realized I needed to finish the book. So I wrote several more chapters. And then I went back and I added a couple of modified articles as chapters as well. So I created a lot more content than was in the original article series. But it came together really, really fast. The whole thing came together in something like 3 months, and it's in the neighborhood of 200 pages. So it's not a very long book, but it's not super short either. It's kind of just a middle of the road length. Um, and it really just shaped itself. The order of the chapters was just there. It was really obvious, and I just went with it and put it out, pretty quickly. Lee, my partner, helped me with the memes. The book has a bunch of memes that we created together. She did the cover, and so I had some help putting it together. But the writing itself was really, really fast.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I've heard you speak about that a few times in your writing process. You speak of it as as you said, a download. Do you think there's something you do in your spiritual practices to kind of prepare you for that? Like, has that always been a process for you, or yeah, like walk us through that?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. I'm aware that different creators have different, different strategies, and so some people do, amazing work in a very, very different way. This is just my process. So I felt early on in my writing career that I, in the beginning, I really felt that I had to, in some sense, I let me back up and punt. My first significant book that never fully got published all the way, even though I got offered a contract for it. All kinds of things happened with it, but I only published the first three of 6 volumes of Beginner's Luke, and I'm in the process of reissuing that as one big book with all six books in it, six quote unquote books. It's basically just one big novel. That in that instance, the character Luke came to me, and I write about this in Potentiate Your DNA. So I did have early on, I had the experience of a book presenting itself to me. I really kind of had this imaginary exchange with my protagonist, and I began writing it. Other parts of that process though weren't as streamlined, and I felt that I was trying to connect with the material outside of myself and at times, as opposed to just letting it show up. So my experience, my if I could use the word, my maturation as a writer has involved learning how to get out of my own way,
Mm.
and then allowing some other voice. I don't necessarily mean, mind control or anything like that, but some other part of me
Mm.
to come in and speak to me and teach me about the story that is wanting to be told. And even the story is like a person or a personage or a consciousness. So, I feel that, we live in a conscious universe. Everything is part of this construct, this consciousness construct. So you can't get away from it. And the best I can do is really just allow it to come through me. So I see myself as kind of a vessel. I
Mm.
also learned how to let the well fill back up. This is really, really important. A lot of young writers feel like they have to make something happen, and they have to think about their writing all the time and focus on it, and it's their life. And Hemingway had a very different approach to all of that, and he called it filling up the well,
Mm.
where he would write in the morning and then he would go and swim or fish or whatever he might do, and then in the evenings he would have food and he might drink and hang out, and he would get up in the morning and the well would be full again, and he would start writing, but he would not have spent his day thinking about his work. That's not what he wanted to do. He didn't want to think about it. He allowed that same intuitive voice that I'm talking about to tell him what needed to be written. And he didn't have to use his left brain
Mm.
to figure it out.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that really speaks to me in my own private practices. That most of what we need to do is really a process of undoing versus the left brain egoic need to push to conquer. It's exactly as you said, getting out of the way. I really like that. I know you've been a practitioner of shamanism, various schools of shamanism, if my memory serves me correct. Do you think that's played a role in you being able to open up in this capacity and to refill the well quickly? Because you're a very prolific author and your content is incredible. So I'd be curious if your background with shamanism specifically is something that's kind of guided you with that.
Yeah, you always ask such really penetrating questions. That When I say that I do shamanic work, I include the healing work that Lee and I developed, which is called Regenetics.
Mm-hmm.
because it's basically a form of sound healing that mirrors many shamanic techniques having to do with using sound, the voice, and the mind, the thought process to create a kind of almost like a helix of sound and light that is capable of healing people at the what I call the inner genetic level,
Mm.
where the feeling can then manifest into their reality. I mean, I've got my whole this new channel, this YouTube channel, Activate Your Potential with Regenetics, is really has been a lot of fun because I've been rolling back out a lot of this material in video form, and I've actually been learning things about it that I didn't know, or just about concepts about this work that are actually new to me in some ways, or maybe I'm just seeing them in a different light. So, I've also, of course, been working on lucid dreaming for a while. I'm widely read in a lot of the shamanic literature. My artwork is on the covers of three best-selling books on shamanism published by Inner Traditions. So certainly even my visual artwork has been recognized as being shamanic.
Mm.
So that's, I dabbled in various kinds of shamanism, but I've not really been a practitioner of anything except my own work. So I would kind of nuance what you said in that way. So having said that, the work that Lee and I developed that is called Regenetics was absolutely a springboard for my creativity, and
Mm.
it unleashed it. I was really sick. The reason we developed it was to try to get me well. I was really sick from an autoimmune illness, a very mysterious, nearly decade-long autoimmune illness. So we developed this work, and the work involves helping you. I'm going to just say this, and it won't make sense to some people, but it helps you bridge duality at the most basic level of your existence.
Mm-hmm.
And it raises your energy exponentially by plugging up a kind of hole in your energetic anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the fragmentary body.
Mm.
Once that happened, I never really looked back with my creative process. I just started writing book after book after book after book after book. One of the things that I became aware of was that in experiencing this Regenetics sound healing work, I was essentially able to raise my Kundalini levels to a very high degree. And for me, Kundalini is the life force. You might want to call it prana or chi or whatever. In any case, it is creative energy in action in your body and in your mind.
Mm.
So more of that energy coming through automatically fosters a more creative life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whew, there's a lot there. Yeah, I wanted to get into Regenetics more later, but we're there now. So,
Well, we
uh,
don't have to stay there. I
oh,
mean, we can
yeah.
always, twirl around if you had a different path, so that's fine.
No, on that, maybe we can start with your take on DNA. You speak about DNA as almost bioholographic, and in based off what you had said earlier there when describing what Regenetics does, I've noticed for me, past traumas, for example, create energy blockages in the body where you don't have that kind of free flow of energy. And so, would you maybe you can speak to the DNA component in Regenetics and also the role of trauma and how Regenetics addresses that.
Okay, yeah, those are really deep and broad subjects. So let's just start with maybe the controversy around DNA. There's a lot of people now. I put out a video or an article, and I'll get comments like, DNA doesn't exist, don't you? This is all whatever. This is crap or whatever. A lot of this Tom Cowan stuff. He's been out there talking about this for a while and linking it to the whole kind of viral question and that sort of thing. And my response has been articulated in a number of places. I wrote an article last year called "Is the Scientific Method Broken, or Did It Never Exist in the First Place?"
Mm-hmm.
And I used that article as a touchstone or a springboard for a chapter in The World, Cult, and You, where I go into some similar material. And essentially, my argument is that nothing exists, that everything is made up. Everything is a construct of consciousness. Everything is an egregore, a tulpa, even you in this avatar. So really, what DNA represents is a kind of mass agreement, culturally speaking, about who we are biologically. And to that extent, it exists. And you can do stuff to it, and you can hybridize things, and you can clone things, and all of these amazing feats can be achieved because we dreamed the concept of DNA into existence.
Hmm.
Nothing can be proven to absolutely fundamentally exist. You know, when we try to just nail down matter and we go down into the atomic structure, we never stop. We just fall and fall and fall and fall straight into the void. So this idea that DNA somehow doesn't exist is very materialistic. It's very kind of, I want to say it's a statement made by an immature mind. Is
Hmm.
what it is to me. And it's a mind that doesn't really understand the nuances of this quote unquote reality construct that we're in, which is basically, as we've discussed before, a massive dreamscape,
Mm-hmm.
a kind of natural organic simulation.
Hmm.
All right, so having said that, we can talk about DNA very productively using the language of quantum bioholography, this whole study of DNA as a kind of holographic fractal phenomenon that sort of doesn't exist in a way. You know, it's this light pattern or light carrier that translates information from essentially different dimensions or different areas of the construct.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you experience trauma that gets held in your energy field, it might express itself through this holographic translation mechanism that is DNA into different problems in your mind, body, and or spirit.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's heavy stuff, Sol. It's a little over my head. Um, but I will say that I did see it on solluckman.substack.com, where I believe you give people the tools for them to empower themselves in retuning their DNA. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. The first activation in the Regenetics method is called potentiation, and it's a repatterning of your energy blueprint. And you can do that the first Sunday of every month virtually with us, and it's free. Or you can learn to do it yourself, and you can learn to do it yourself with a free trial of my Substack, for that matter. You will need a specific tuning fork, which you can get online or through phoenixregenetics.org.
Mm-hmm.
It's 528 hertz. It's the me note. Leonard Horowitz has written a lot about it. He calls it the love frequency, and it's really the most powerful frequency for activating genetic potential. So you would need that if you wanted to learn how to do it. If you want to learn how to do potentiation, you can read Potentiate Your DNA, which is available on my Substack as well as on Amazon and other places. And you can also watch the video tutorial I made last year, well, this year or last year, called How to Potentiate Your DNA. And that is an exclusive on my Substack at solluckman.substack.com. So you can access that with a free trial.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to do it and report back. I might DM you if I have some questions, but it looks like very interesting stuff. Okay, well, I definitely want to also focus on the new book. New chapters come out, fresh as always. mind-blowing. I'm still putting myself back together again while being delooshed. So, in the world cult in you bring up a controversy that doomsday cults might actually be dangerous, and that trauma bonding around the end of the world may actually not be a good thing. Sol Luckman, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but I have a meme somewhere in my in it came out after the book, um, but it's based on what's in the book, and I'm trying to see if I can pull it up. The in essence, it's the meme is stop helping doomsday cults bring about doomsday using your energy. So this is a kind of a different way of understanding what's going on with loosh.
Hmm.
Loosh can be used to do anything because it is just kundalini, it's life force, it's chi, it's consciousness, it's torsion energy, it's orgone energy, it's scalar waves, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing in my estimation. So it can build positive outcomes, it can build positive structures, worlds, communities, technologies, but it can also build very negative ones. So we're in this weird feedback loop with the construct and the great parasite that keeps creating negative outcomes, and it keeps us in what I call a loosh loop of negative and less than desirable outcomes. Within this this scenario, you have doomsday cults of all kinds, whether you're talking about traditional, very obvious cults, or less traditional, less obvious cults like the truther cults online on YouTube and other places, where they are essentially talking plasma apocalypse, wormwood, phoenix phenomenon, etc., and they are being utilized, whether they know it or not, by the great parasite to bend reality, quote unquote, in a doomsday direction.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
when you give them your attention, just listening to their words, and then subscribing to them, sending them money, likes, shares, follows, comments, all you're doing is promoting doomsday.
Hmm.
Because there's nothing intrinsically there. It's all made up. You're choosing to buy into that narrative. You could extrapolate this potentially even to works of literature and movies that you give your attention to. Our attention is extremely powerful. And if you're giving it away to something that does not contain inspiration or hope, as opposed to hopium, or positive energy, understand that that can be utilized to do things that you might not agree with if you were really shown the contract that you're signing with that interaction.
That's very well put. However, I see there is such a reluctance to really support and dive deep in messages of empowerment. I notice even for myself on social media, if I point out a more truther related concept, you get a lot of love. You get a lot of
Yep.
attention, and
Absolutely.
conversely, the opposite. When you speak messages of empowerment, of personal, um, de-loosening, it is less powerful. So there does seem to be a deep, like, psychic drive almost in humans to repeat these patterns that you're pointing out. Well, yeah, in that respect, do you think active de-loosening is something that we can make cool and popular? Where do you think the gaps are with people not embracing this type of concept more?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know if we can, because it's a very steep hill to climb. I'll say that fear sells, and we see this over and over again in relation to this discussion. We're really talking about behaviors like very self-defeating, self-abnegating, behaviors that are a product of trauma-based mind control. I don't know any other way of putting it.
Hmm.
It also this kind of behavior that you describe is, to me, it shows the extent to which the majority of the population are downloaded by the consciousness of the great parasite, and they're using its operating system,
Hmm.
so that they're not really even thinking with their mind. So they can't see the forest for the trees. They can't see the positive. They can't see the potential that's being presented, like all of these weird things going on in our reality constantly. And a lot of it's freaky and maybe scary. And people go with that as if that's going to solve anything or help in some way, when really, I believe all of that fear is being promoted by the construct at the behest of the great parasite
Mm.
in order to wake the flock up. I think they're trying, the whole concept is that all of the anomalies and conspiracies and the fear and everything, when you step back from it, it's so unreal. It's such overkill.
Yeah.
It's obviously not real. That this is like bad screenplay writing. This is a bad script. It's not believable.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. You've said a few things that I find very interesting in that respect. So we have a question in the chat. Matt Steves, he's saying, "Isn't talking about cults or even this something like this podcast not a form of loosening itself?" Sol Luckman, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you must. I bet I know what community you're coming over from. Haha. Let's see. Um, Absolutely not. Emphatically 100% not. Because first of all, you have to have the desire to take that loosh and do something bad or negative with it. So that doesn't exist here. And I am bringing an empowering message for people. That is not a form of loosh. That's a form of giving energy back to people to let them do with it what they will, instead of taking it and doing what I want to do with it,
Mm.
which is what you see over and over again. So I don't even know how you could do the math on that question, just to be completely honest.
Okay, a telling rebuke from the great, a Luckmanian rebuke, like we all need. Having said that, if I may push back, Sal, you have spoken quite a bit about the deep cultural hypnosis that we are all under, but you have also spoken about the fact that overeducation can be a problem in reloosening, if you will. So, what I'm hearing from you is that there is very much a middle path that we have to take. Am I understanding you correctly in terms of finding the balance?
Yeah, I write about that in the World Cult in You, where I talk about the process of awakening and coming face to face with all of these conspiracies and doing the research and all of that. And I state explicitly that I'm not saying not to do these things, not to
Mm-hmm.
think, I'm not saying not to think critically. I'm not saying not to do the research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, I also say that there comes a time when you realize that everything that you discover through your research is basically being fed to you because you're looking for it.
Mm.
We are in a feedback loop that's just showing us kind of where what we're believing in or choosing to believe in.
I see. So you're really talking about almost like a self correcting enemy, if you will. That the more you get angry, the deeper you dig, it kind of moves and permeates around that to keep you trapped. Am I hearing you correctly?
Well, not necessarily. At some point, to let you wake up. This is what people want. They love these narratives about being trapped or in a soul trap, a reincarnation trap, or other things that make it seem like we're victims of this reality. What I'm saying is that you keep feeding your research into the construct, and it keeps giving back to you what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could get interested in something else and start researching that, and then suddenly it would start feeding back to you other information based on that. And if you compare the two things you've been researching, they may be mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you get proof for both. This is what's happening on a massive scale in the conspiracy theory community.
Right.
So we have this smorgasbord of contradictory bits of research, all of which have substance. They actually have evidence. The problem is that all of the substance and evidence are just fabrications of consciousness. The
Mm.
construct is just giving that back to you. So at some point, the only logical conclusion is that this is all in my head. And that's the wake up moment when you can say, I'm creating. And now what do I want to create now that I'm conscious that I'm creating?
Mm.
So really it's a service to us to have all of this weirdness. And I think it might be part of our own design from some higher aspect of ourselves. That aspect of ourselves where we are the creator with a capital C. I think it's part of the design of this world.
Right. Yeah. Well, I do see to an extent where the question lies. So for example, there's several practitioners or teachers and psychologists who speak about narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder, and how narcissists impact
Mm-hmm.
you, and they are waking up millions of people to how narcissism works and how insidious it is,
Yes.
and especially empaths, right, who need to know this, who need to be more psychologically guarded. But then you see
Mm.
in a lot of the comments and in these groups, it is just a spiral in itself, right? You need to get in to understand these mechanisms, but at a certain point, they just keep talking about narcissism for years on end, and focusing on narcissists in society, and this guy's, and it, so to me it just seems like a trap in itself. You see what I'm saying?
I think I do. This is where anything can kind of, like a vehicle can be going along, and then it can, and it gets you almost to where you're trying to get, and then you get in the mud and you start spinning your wheels. I see this phenomenon quite a bit where they're not willing to go the last mile to get to that destination, which is a point of tremendous sovereignty and freedom and creativity. And that is not the narcissistic moment, but it's the solipsistic moment.
Mm.
When you totally realize that you are creating what you're perceiving, and that you're participating in group creations where various people are perceiving the same thing, et cetera, where you cannot not do that,
Mm.
then it's very empowering. It's also a massive responsibility you've just been handed. This is a Peter Parker moment. With great power comes great responsibility. And it's the absolute opposite of narcissism when you get to that moment for a lot of people, I believe, because you realize what's happening, and you are kind of, I believe you're humbled by what you see, and as opposed to having your ego pumped up, because it's such a freaky thing to realize that there's only one of us here. And in a world where there's only one of us here, this idea of narcissism and out of control ego just goes away, because who is there to impress?
Mm-hmm.
Who is there to
Wow.
control?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very profound, and it's hard to truly wrap your mind around what you're saying. So let's unpack that a little bit. So what I really resonate with uh, in your kind of first um, position is that we've both come to this conclusion in the truther movement, right? That you can find endless rabbit holes to go down, yes, but when you get even, high level truther, you realize that you can argue both positions and that you can find data on both positions that are total juxtapositions. And when you hit that, you can come to the conclusion of one side has to be wrong, I have to be right, disinfo, shill, which creates polarization, but you're taking a far more deeper and consciousness centric position. You're saying that is evidence that A, the scientific method as we know it is bunk, but B, this is essentially a choose your own adventure, a simulated collective dream. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, you said it beautifully. That's very, very close to how I understand it.
And so, how do we internalize that, right? So, I am like well aware on a mental level of the concept. In some ways, that is a Buddhist concept, right? In other ways, it kind of transcends. But in your own lives, how do we fully embody that and prove that it's true beyond these kind of small examples? Like how does one fully internalize and embody that in their own lives? Because it's a mind screw, right?
Right, right. Well, I think there are different strategies that one can adopt with different intentions and with different potential outcomes. One is to learn how to lucid dream.
Mm.
It's a very learnable skill. It takes a little bit of time. It's somewhat hit or miss, especially in the beginning. And you can even go through droughts if you are good at it. I've been in a little bit of one and then it just broke recently, so that was really cool. The lucid dreaming is so powerful because you are awake within the dream
Mm-hmm.
and you realize that you are essentially creating what you're perceiving and that you can direct your dream and you can literally create and destroy worlds if you want to in your dream. And it's so real that the next logical thought for a lot of people is this is essentially no different from what I think of as reality. It's like that Zhuangzi quote, the I did not know if I was a, and when I woke up, I didn't know if I was a man dreaming I was a butterfly or if I was a butterfly dreaming I was a man. There is which one is the dream and which one is the reality. And I think that the answer to that kind of that riddle is that neither of them is reality and both of them are reality.
Mm.
Reality is a dream, and that's all you get.
Yeah.
There is no real, there is no essence, there is only movements of perception. So lucid dreaming is a really powerful teaching tool in these concepts, and then you can learn how to do all kinds of things in your dreaming that can affect what you think of as reality. Like you can heal yourself with lucid dreams. You can create wealth. You can increase the likelihood of success in a lot of different areas. You can actually see what you might think of as tangible benefits to lucid dreaming that you are intending, and that is that's a really, really powerful lesson.
Hmm. Yeah, I practice lucid dreaming as well, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a very profound practice. Um, but I'd be curious, in your waking life, have you had any experiences that illustrated what we call cracks in the matrix? I have, and very interesting stuff, almost glitches or cracks in the matrix. One example was I started doing a deep meditation practice, and one time I walked out my door and I went to a cafe, and two ex-girlfriends of mine, one lived in a different province, just happened to be visiting, were one after each other in the line. And then I walked down the road and I bumped into two different people I hadn't seen in 10 years, just casually in a crowded city. And then I walked down the street a little further and I saw an entire family that were childhood friends of mine that I hadn't seen in 20 years, all standing right in front of the window, jaw dropped, that I was looking at them. And then the next morning, I get on the subway and I'm standing at the subway, and one of the guys from the family, doors open, he's standing right there in rush hour traffic. We looked at each other, we didn't even say a word for like 2 minutes. We're just jaw dropped. You know, he was blown away, I was blown away. And so a lot of people have these types of experiences about in their waking life, seeing those little cracks or glitches in the matrix, as they say. Are these things that you've experienced that have kind of informed your current positions?
Oh yeah, I mean all my life I've had extraordinary serendipities. I've been a walking serendipity magnet. It's just unbelievable the stuff that's happened to me. I when I was studying abroad, my junior year of college, I was in Europe and I was going to visit a friend who was in Bologna, and I was in Florence. I had arrived in Florence. I'd traveled from France, and I had no way of contacting her. This was pre-internet, cell phone, all that. We're talking, 1980s here. And I decided I'm going to go anyway. I'm going to go to Bologna. If nothing else, I'm going to go eat some good food, and then, figure out what to do. And so the train pulls in, and I'm standing there with my backpack on, and she literally gets off the train in front of me. We haven't spoken in like 8 months.
Wow.
Another time, I'm thinking of some friends. Also, this is the same year. This is all in the same year. I'm thinking of some friends. I'm in Brindisi, Italy, getting ready to take the boat over to Corfu, Greece. And I've been thinking about this guy named Neil, who was another friend of mine, who was also studying abroad. He was studying in London.
Hmm.
I hadn't seen him, hadn't heard from him, and wasn't even that good a friend, but he popped into my mind. And then I hear someone call my name, and I turn around, and he's getting on the boat with me.
Wow.
This happens over and over and over and over. But I've had even freakier things. I write in Potentiate Your DNA about how the codes for potentiation came through, and it involved a supernatural moment that was witnessed by two people, myself and Lee, where we saw these lights coming across the water of the ocean in Brazil, and they literally popped into us.
Whoa.
So I've had very, very strange things. I mean, there were other extremely bizarre instances where, talk about the shamanic thing. When we were traveling through Brazil, I was I felt very strongly that as we were trying to, bring through the codes for Regenetics or for potentiation, we didn't even have a name for it, I don't think, at the time. I can't remember when the name actually came through, but we knew we were there to do this thing, and we felt that there was a lot of support. We had been given money, like a friend just showed up one day and just said, "I really believe in what you're doing. I don't fully understand it, but here's some money," and it was a lot of money to support that trip when we were going down to Brazil to try to bring through this energy healing to get me well, because I was really, really sick. So I felt that there was a lot of support, but I also felt that there were forces, that were attempting to waylay us. And I literally, at one point in time, I felt so intensely that we were encountering weather spirits,
Hmm.
that these weather spirits would show up and they would do crazy anomalous weather to us. I mean, we were in one town in Brazil one time. We walk into a churrascaria to eat. We walk back out, and literally To get back to our apartment, we wade through about 3.5 feet of water. And it
Wow.
happened like it's almost impossible that it could have happened that fast. So there were just very strange things going on. Again, in retrospect, I think that's part of my own perceptual apparatus that's kind of bringing through both things, both the support and the resistance, because that was part of me.
Hmm.
That was part of my psyche, maybe my unhealed duality and trauma were speaking, and I was getting both at the same time.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I noticed that it happens way more when you're traveling. There's something about being static that maybe subdues it a bit. But I notice as well, if I do traveling without a lot of pre planning, things just, um, I guess, show themselves like that. I was in Southeast Asia and I ran into this one author. Guy had an incredible story. I met him in 3 different countries in across Southeast Asia over the course of 2 months. Like we'd walk down the most like busy street in Bangkok and he's there, and then we'd see him in Cambodia in a back alley. The odds of this are impossible, right? And so that kind of shows the chinks in the armor of the reality that you're discussing. And but yeah, do you think there's something unique to traveling itself that brings out these experiences, or do you experience them the same regardless?
I absolutely feel that way. There's something to travel. That's a major theme in Beginner's Luke. Here's a little passage that speaks to this exactly. So you have this narrator, Luke, who is he's imagining his life. So he's literally writing himself into existence in his book that you're reading. So he said, I was a child of motion, as much a creature of the road as of words. On the road, as with words, everything becomes surreal and possible. Take away the words and you erase me. Take away the road and I wither. My life's poetry dissolves, and the only dreams I remember are nightmares of stasis.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that sums it up right there. Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that. And what you're discussing there as well, there's a huge element of manifestation that you were talking about, right? You had a need, and a hero arises. So I know you have several works on manifestation, but maybe we could speak to that a little bit. I'd be curious to know your stance within your framework, the role of manifestation. Just like, how does it work? Is it just through focus or that emotional connection? What degree can we manifest versus it being a collective dream where there is chaos or other parties? Yeah, Sol, maybe you could fill us in on your paradigm of manifestation.
So what it takes to manifest is power. This is, a specific application or quality of energy or consciousness. So you need personal power to manifest in a conscious way. This is a deeply shamanic concept. And you can develop personal power in a variety of ways. And I write about 2 different paths for developing personal power in the world, cult, and you. The first path is a bunch of things that you don't do. Like you don't give away your power. You don't sit around watching the news, blah, blah, blah. You don't put yourself in a position to be looshed and to give away your power.
Mm-hmm.
And the second path is a provisional list that's meant to be inspiring, and maybe you have other ideas along similar lines, and it's meant to inspire you to take action in certain ways. And so you can build power through through earthing, through lucid dreaming, through Regenetics, through other things. So you build up this power that you can then utilize in a conscious. So much can occur from the group perspective is that you are multiplying the power because you have all of these people contributing to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the real challenge as an individual is to become strong enough to create your own little world within the world.
Mm.
and to ultimately exit the world when you're ready in a conscious way, to utilize your power to literally leave the simulation with your consciousness intact. That's the game. That if when people ask me if we're living in a kind of game, if this is a game board, which is a metaphor that I use in the World Cult and You, how do you win it? And that's how you win. You consciously exit it with your awareness intact.
Mm. Wow. That's incredible. Do you experience states of consciousness? Like, is that through meditation? Like, have you experienced a realm of consciousness beyond this simulation?
I think people do it every night when they dream. You're in a different simulation when you're dreaming. You're in a different quote unquote reality. So it's very common to experience this, and I don't think one needs meditation to do that at all.
Mm.
I've never had a lot of success with meditation. I think one thing that meditation can provide is glimpses into this what I call the silent stillness, where you you align yourself with that creative force that we call God or Great Spirit, or we give it so many names, and you recognize that you are that. That's where meditation can assist, but you can do that in so many other ways. You can do that just by being creative and experiencing yourself as a creator and feeling that inspiration coming through. And this is a great way to build power. And as you build power, you can enter the silent stillness much more easily, and you can be in it for longer periods of time and create from it to a degree. So that's very, very exciting. I think you know, this is a very complex topic, but to boil it down, the the idea that we have to reach beyond the world to have these experiences, I think it's a kind of a red herring or a false lead.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, like so I've played around with manifestation for years, finding Neville Goddard and the New
Oh yeah.
Thought movement of the early like 1900s. And what I've seen is that it does work, but for me at least, it's hit or miss, and it brings about a lot of issues. One,
Hmm.
often egoically, I believe we think we want things that we don't really want, and that can impact our actual intent. And then also, we often what's the right way to say it? Well, oh, it's harder. How should I phrase it? Yeah, well, we could maybe start there. Like egoically, we often think we want things that might not be of our divine, our deeper essence, soul essence, and also it can be hard to. There has to be an alignment, right? I've recently interviewed some people who have laid out quite a case for black magic being the case and being practiced and being effective, right? Where it seems with manifestation, you have to have almost like a triple win. Like you have to gain, but it also has to have somebody else kind of manifest their desire in that moment, and everybody gain at the same time. So, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of the limitations and the kind of requirements necessary to really bring these things forward? Is it simply a matter of personal power, or do more things have to align as well?
Well, it begins and ends with power, and that includes your personal power. And if you're looking at changing something in the world, then you are interacting with other power grids, other egregores, other tulpas, other forms of consciousness that may or may not be in alignment with what you're trying to create. So I also don't think there is a positive or negative to power, meaning it can be used for quote unquote good and quote unquote bad
Mm.
things. Um, it's just which direction you apply it. Um, so what I would say about manifestation in relation to this overall discussion is that it's related to where we started our discussion this evening, having to do with this notion of getting out of your own way and allowing things to manifest organically or naturally through you.
Mm.
It has to do with releasing some of the more controlling aspects of the ego and entering into more of a flow state with this dreamlike reality. And for example, if you're in a dream, and even if when you're lucid dreaming, if you try too hard to create something, you're forcing it, and you'll usually wake up and fall, or at least fall out of the lucidity.
Right.
So that there's a lesson in that you actually do need to relax, de-stress, de-loosh, etc., even as you are, powering yourself up. And this brings into question for me, what is manifestation? Is manifestation always getting what you want? I don't think it is. I think this is another false definition of a phenomenon. Manifestation is getting essentially what the wiser part of you knows that you need.
Okay.
This idea that you manifest and you get exactly what you want it's very narcissistic, it's very egotistical, it's arrogant, it's childish, and it's usually pretty destructive actually, because it can put on some major blinders, and it can blind you to the small miracles that may be occurring all around you as you pursue this kind of myopic vision of what you want to create, as opposed to allowing it to organically come about and lending your power to that organic process. Much more of a flow state here. The more I spend time with these concepts, and the older I get, the more I feel that we really can't take credit for a lot. That things happen through us even when we think we're doing them, and yet we're also creating. That's why I coined this way of expressing it as we are the creator, we are the created creating.
Wow. Yeah,
Kind of like the arts, you kind of bite your own tail. You're the alpha and the omega of your experience. And so you're on both sides of it. It's the paradox of existence. It's one of the reasons it's very difficult for materialists, closet materialists, or avowed materialists to deal with these notions that everything is so slippery and so kind of meta, so reflected and mirroring. It's there's nothing straightforward about this mystery that we're inhabiting.
right. Yeah, and what really spoke to me when you're saying you have to be in that flow state and not care too much. I heard a story of a lady who found the secret in manifestation techniques, and apparently for 2 years she did nothing but hyper focus on winning the lottery. And apparently after 2 years she won like $70 million. But her entire life just totally fell apart. People betrayed her, everybody messed her up, tried to take advantage of her, and her life was horrible, as actually many lottery winners are. But maybe does that speak to what you're saying, in that, sure, with enough focus and intent you can bring something forward, but if there's that force behind it, it won't end up well for you?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes things that at the time seem like failures end up being part of the guidance system that is helping you manifest the life that you want. When I was in graduate school and I got really sick and I had to drop out and I had to give up my dream of becoming a professor and an academic, that was really brutal. It was devastating. It was devastating to my sense of self and my ego. And I was in my, I was fairly young at the time. I was, my 30-ish. I was in that range, and that was really, really difficult. So, uh, if I had stayed in that mindset, it would be difficult to see what an opportunity that presented for me to completely begin thinking and experiencing outside the box. It's when I began to think about energy and DNA and energenetics and all of this other stuff that never would have occurred to me if I had been in that thought prism of academics.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe there's a self-correcting mechanism there, right? If you're really self-identified with the ego and have, egoic desires of, I want $5 million or I want to be famous or something, you're not really connecting to your, what have you, spirit, higher self, whatever you want to call it, to really bring that forth. So it seems like it's almost like a protection mechanism there in a way.
Oh, I'm glad you said that because I had made a kind of mental note to go there, and then it kind of skipped me. But there is a self-protective mechanism in there, and sometimes we are removed, and then sometimes forcefully removed from situations that we have no place being in. This is what happened to me with this online truther cult this summer that initiated the World Cult and You.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody hit the ejector seat on me from that whole situation. And at the time it was devastating. I was very upset. And then I realized what was going on and that I was dealing with cult dynamics. And then that opened up an entire massive chamber in my consciousness, if you will, where I was able to see things much more clearly, and I was given language. I opened up and I was given language to talk and write about these things. One of the problems with the whole cult phenomenon, and this is something that Max Morris and I have talked about in some of our interviews, is that it's so this idea that everything is trafficking in society. That's what society is. Given the ubiquity and omnipresence of this situation, it's ironic that we don't have more language to talk about it. It's the grass growing around us. We just don't have language for it, but it's everywhere.
Hmm.
So I was given some language to begin having this conversation. And so what I put out in this book is language and concept for talking about this phenomenon that is enslaving so many people, but that most people aren't even aware of. And if they are aware of it, they don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's, you have to have that mental or what have you framework to really understand what's even going on and to be able to engage with it, right? And I think that's a large part of your work.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was a big reason why this book came through and sort of came through the way it did as a lesson in, being protected by some other aspect of myself, manifesting something quite different from what I thought I wanted in a kind of egoic way, and then allowing that inspiration to come through, allowing the ideas and even the words to come through in the writing of the book, and then feeling like I wrote it or it came through me, but I'm not sure exactly where it came from. That's, I think that's what art is all about. We just never really know where it came from. It's a mystery.
Okay. Yeah, and And so, like for me, when I have those types of experience, I see that as God. I guess you would feel the same, but you would chop that up more. There is no delineation between yourself and God ultimately. Am I understanding correct?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even if you think about the scientific notion of the Big Bang, which I know people in the truther community or, just reject almost across the board. And I don't accept or reject it because I think it's another story that we've told ourselves. So some people believe the story and some people don't. That's fine. But even in this hyper materialistic story that is sort of designed to make people feel insignificant and super temporary and unimportant, little specks in the cosmos, the whole notion of the Big Bang coming from nothingness is a story of the ultimate unity of creation, where there is only one thing, which is
Right.
not really a thing at all, of course, but it's just a unity. It's what I call the silent stillness. And so, even in our most materialistic narratives, we can't escape the idea that if you trace everything back to its origin, we all end up as part of the same consciousness.
Mm, that's really deep, man. I'm gonna have to think on that for a while. It's Sol Luckman's always dropping these bombs, people. He it takes a while to really wrap your mind around what you're saying. I can imagine it to be true. I've seen things point in that direction, but fully embodying it, I think, at least for me, is the struggle. But where are you at now? So I know you've deprogrammed from all cults, big and small. You talk about that quite a bit in your book as well. But do you still play around with, like, do you still look into things? Gematria, Tartaria, Mandela effect. I heard from a birdie that you might be, or at one time were fairly interested in cryptozoology. So are you still engaging in these types of topics just without getting hooked and sucked in, or are you just kind of taking a step back from that entire life?
Well, the one item that you just listed that I would consider to be rather different from the other items is the Mandela effect.
Mm,
The Mandela effect to me is just how the construct operates. It can rewrite itself. It can rewrite itself forward and backward. It can use predictive programming. It can use, you know, anything to disappear things from history, to add things in, to create different future outcomes, to create different memories, downloads. All of it is part of the way this construct works. So I'm very interested in the Mandela effect as part of a larger exploration of how this consciousness construct, this dreamscape, how it functions.
okay.
The other things, like I could care less about Tartaria or the ice wall or any of that. I still have a soft spot in my heart for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That's Bigfoot is a character. Sasquatch is a character in my novel Snooze, and I grew up, fascinated by that. So that's probably just a sentimental connection.
Okay.
There again, I don't think there is or is not a Bigfoot. I think if you really believe in Bigfoot, then it exists for you, and if you don't, it doesn't. And that's just because you have the ability to create lanes in the reality construct that are unlike lanes that other people live in. We don't all live in the same reality. We don't live in the same world.
Right. Yeah. So in your own life, you're just pretty much out of it, right? You look into the Mandela effect with respect to how it relates to your model or view of reality. I guess you could argue the same about Bigfoot, UFO, other stuff, but for the most part, you don't even spend a lot of time there. Like you've kind of fully deprogrammed, if you will.
Well, fully deprogrammed from truther and
Yeah.
conspiracy material, yeah, I would say absolutely. I'm 100% off of that. I took the needle out and I haven't put it back in. Um, but it doesn't mean I'm not researching things, there, or looking at things or thinking. I'm
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
thinking and learning. I learn every day. I do a lot of looking in now. I'm really into the idea of gnosis and intuition and feeling the truth, if I could use that word, of certain things, the truth or falsehood. I mean, again, those are such relative terms in a construct where everything is a fabrication. But if something resonates, that's important to me. And it doesn't really matter what people think about it or even what the evidence is if it really resonates, because I'm feeling, I'm being given some kind of sign or signal that I should pay attention to it at the very least. I don't always know what I'm supposed to get out of it, but I will pay attention to it if I get that. And so that's using a process of kind of inner gnosis to connect with other data, other information that might be presenting itself to me. And then obviously, if one is out there using social media, or which I'm doing and promoting what my work, obviously you are not outside the cult in those activities. The social media is one of the biggest cults in the history of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've focused on is building my personal power, staying focused on the things that help me do that. And when I have to enter the matrix, if you will, being really on my guard about it, and not in a paranoid way, but just really guarding my energy. And if I encounter material or people that I realize are potential looshers, and they're everywhere, then I will not engage that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And you develop a sensitivity to it. For me, I've never been on a anti, violence crusade or been a Puritan. But for me, even a lot of movies I watch now, I just find so dark and like just gratuitous, and I just got to turn it off. I feel that it's just putting me in a bad headspace very quickly. And have you
Mm.
noticed that's the same? Just in like general sensitivity to things, the more you kind of deprogram.
Yes, I feel like there have been phases for me in that, like when when I was when I felt like I had been loosed and I felt that I had less power than I do now, I was more susceptible to that. So I think that, power is its own insulation in some ways, its own protection, its own armor. Maybe that's the armor of God. I don't know. Um, but the if you think about the messages that are coming through in our mainstream uh, media, in our movies and books and that kind of thing, yeah, most of the time it's really dark, or it's perverse and twisted in one way or another. And this is not an ethical judgment. It's a power judgment. You can just feel what it's doing to you or trying to do to you as you watch it.
Yeah.
And there's not really a redeeming quality, and you're not given there's no denouement and resolution that leads you to think about things in a potentially powerful way, you know. And I compare that to, for example, the last two novels that I wrote, where there are difficult things that happen in those stories that can be even disturbing. So on the one hand, yeah, I'm using some of the same tropes and techniques that we see in some of this popular entertainment, but when you get to the end of those books, you are in a very different mental and heart space. It's much more uplifting, positive, solutions oriented, and provocative in a good way, in terms of how do I process this story now personally, and what do I do with it? And it can really take you upward. And I say that because I believe it. I also say that because, you can read the reviews and see what people have said about these works, that this is Kali the Destroyer and snooze.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally see what you're saying. Well, it's both a sensitivity, but then also you build your immunity to it, I think, in terms of, what you're talking about, the perverse and all of that. And it's just a general turn towards wanting to have high consciousness content, right? Like, and I think you're a really good contributor to that. And I also think it's just part of the game where 95% of the movies in theaters at any given time, it like I like going out to the movies. It's a fun experience, but almost all of them are just recycled garbage with no clear message or ethic that you can take away, or it's just like consumption for the sake of consumption, which I think is by design.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And yet every once in a while you see something that's really um, amazing and that does open your mind. And so I remember, and this is, when I first saw The Matrix, I know that there are other control-based themes in that, but it was very, very eye-opening. I felt the same way about, on a different wavelength entirely, about Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon movie from the same general time frame, maybe a little bit after The Matrix, called Pleasantville. Which is really,
Yep.
if you want to know how if you want to know how the construct works, just watch Pleasantville. It's a true teaching movie in
I,
many
I
ways.
watched it last week. I found it doing some
Oh,
searches.
that's
That's
funny.
Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah, it's
Well, there you
so
go.
good.
Serendipity. There, we're definitely tracking along on similar paths.
Yeah, imagine if they just put out one movie that was truly inspirational. What that would have on the consciousness. Like for me, it does feel like this intentional suppression of human consciousness, you know, in capturing the imagination. I wonder what that would do for the simulacrum if just actually empowering good natured high vibe media was allowed to hit the masses.
I've wondered that, and the perverse part of me wonders if we would just get bored to tears.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. That's who knows. Maybe yeah, there's something in us that does crave that mindless content. Like I know so many people, even doctors, who get sucked in with the just lowest brow reality television. Like what?
Right, right. But also the fear, the danger, the sense of adventure that you get in a reality where it's not apparently it's not safe. It's scary and weird, and you know, it's full of mystery and unsolved situations, dilemmas, that kind of thing. So if we didn't have that and everything were just uplifting and we were constantly being, maybe this is why people are so on the the fear and loathing wavelength, on the in terms of what they consume. It's because there's that part of them that wants to be stimulated by that to rise above it, and they realize that it's actually potentially something that's feeding them. Max Morris, to cite her once again, over at Intuitive Public Radio, she made a beautiful observation when she was reading The World Cult and You. She said, this great parasite actually is in a position to give us all of the energy that it will take from us if we let it.
Yep. Yeah, and breaking the mold. I've been speaking to a man who was previously like a high priest of a black magic order, and what he said, which resonates with that, is that the entities, demons, whatever you have, they follow the law, and that they're not actually necessarily your adversary. They're there to teach you a purpose, and I get a similar message in all of your works as well. Instead of being combative and seeing this as the adversary, which then you get looshed, you're coming from a similar perspective as well, where it's just embracing the nature of them and not getting emotionally hooked and honoring them, if you will.
Yeah, you could see them as like your shadow, your parts of your shadow self, and that rather than fighting them, which just perpetuates the duality and the problems that you're experiencing, you can integrate them and move towards wholeness, and that's how you build more power.
Wow, fantastic. Well, so I want to be respectful of your time. I know you do have to get going soon. I want to thank everyone on the stream for bearing with me. So, I lost live stream just very quickly a couple times, but we did make it through a blizzard that I'm currently living through on Off Grid Life. So, first, I just want to tell the listeners that Sol's Substack, solluckman.substack.com, is incredible. He has everything there. He has his books. You can repotentiate your DNA. He has award-winning fiction that's highbrow, high consciousness content. So people would be a fool not to subscribe. I know you're unbiased. So what do you think? Maybe quickly pitch your Substack because I'm really enjoying it.
Could I hire you for my marketing?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really do appreciate that. I mean, I put a lot of work into it. I mean, a lot of play as well. So for me, it's a labor of love. If people go there and like what they see, they can do a free trial, and then the next step would be to go beyond that. But you can have 7 days back in there, experiencing quite a bit of exclusive and premium content. So I hope you like it.
Great. Yeah, everybody, if you want to be de-looshed, entertained, and healing at the DNA level, solluckman.substack.com. Anything you want to leave the audience with, Sol? Anything top of mind for you?
Well, I wish you well in the blizzard. I hope that your power doesn't go out, or you say you're off grid. So I assume you're prepared for whatever might happen. So anyway, best of luck with that.
Thanks.
And I really appreciate you having me back on. This was a nice follow-up, very different energy from our first chat. So I was happy to be able to kind of get my thoughts together and get my energy up a little bit. Coffee helped.
Nice.
So
yeah.
yeah. But this was a fun conversation. We went into some really good territory. I always learn things when I'm having these interviews. I think through other parts of this model, and sometimes I have questions that I go away with and I spend time with. So this has been a really good one for helping me see more clearly, um, you know, what I'm saying and maybe how I want to unpack what I'm saying in some new ways.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us. And guys, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I'm just going to close down the stream, Sol, and I'll say a quick goodbye. Okay, thanks, everybody.
All righty.